champs. Come on! It's like clubbing baby seals.
As basketball fans, we like to think that given the opportunity, we could run an NBA franchise just as well, if not significantly better, than actual teams have managed. In reality, the closest the vast majority of us will ever get is through games like 2K. Still, while most of us have no idea how to run an actual NBA franchise, there's some pretty obvious things of what not to do, as illustrated by real-life franchises and their baffling decisions over the years.
Grab him by the pussy.
Each and every team, at some point in their history, has made epic mistakes, with long-reaching consequences, and that's what this series is about. I'll be covering the mistakes of each current NBA team, along with those of former clubs, and maybe even some international franchises.
Are you healed?
Here's how not to run an NBA franchise, as illustrated by the Los Angeles Clippers. Or rather, Donald Sterling's Los Angeles Clippers. Few teams have squandered their draft picks like the Clippers have. Officially, executive Elgin Baylor is to blame. Between 1986 and 2008, Baylor served as the team's top official, and during his tenure, the Clippers managed to win only 2 seasons and amassed a win-loss record of 607 to 1,153. They also only won 1 playoff series during this time. A lot of their failures come down to their ineptitude when it comes to drafting players. The Clippers have been relatively lucky with the picks they've got. However, with the exception of a couple of cases, they were incredibly unlucky with their actual selections. In 1987, the Clippers selected Reggie Williams with the 4th pick, just 1 pick ahead of Scottie Pippen. They also passed on Horace Grant, Reggie Miller, Mark Jackson, Reggie Lewis, and Kevin Johnson. In 1989, the Clippers had the 2nd pick and chose Denny Ferry, who refused to play for the team. 1 pick later, the Spurs took Sean Elliott. The Clippers also could have selected Glenn Rice, Sean Kemp, Tim Hardaway, Dana Barros, Vlade Divac, or Cliff Robinson. In 1990, the Clippers selected Bo Kimble with the 8th pick, ahead of Jason Williams, Dee Brown, Tyrone Hill, Antonio Davis, Cedric Ceballos, and Tony Kukoc. In 1994, the Clippers drafted Lamont Murray with the 7th pick, ahead of Eddie Jones, Jalen Rose, and Aaron McKee. In 1995, the Clippers landed the 2nd pick in the draft. They got even luckier when Golden State drafted Joe Smith. However, the Clippers selected Antonio McDyess when they could have taken Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, or Kevin Garnett. Given McDyess's explosive athleticism in his early years in the league, things could have turned out okay for the Clippers with their selection. But before he even played a single game, McDyess was traded to Denver for Rodney Rogers, Brian Williams, and Brent Barry. The following year in a loaded 1996 draft, the Clippers used their 7th pick on Lorenzen Wright, passing on Peja Stojakovic, Steve Nash, Jermaine O'Neal, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and Kobe Bryant. Ultimately, for all the Clippers' terrible decisions in various drafts over the years, their profound ineptitude, both leading up to and during the historic 1984 draft, sums up everything about the team and their failings relating to drafting players. In 1978, the Clippers traded their 1984 first-round pick to Philadelphia for World B. Free. That pick would turn out to be the 5th overall, for which the 76ers would draft future Hall of Famer Charles Barkley. Despite things looking bad in hindsight, Free was a decent addition to the Clippers, as he was one of the best scorers in the league. However, the Clippers traded him to the Warriors right when he was entering his prime, after just 2 seasons with the team. In exchange, the Clippers got Phil Smith and a 1984 first-round pick, which ended up being the 8th overall selection. So, basically, the Clippers traded down from the 5th pick in the 1984 draft for the 8th pick, with nothing to show for it. And yet, somehow, the Clippers would manage to make the 1984 draft even worse for themselves. Despite everything, the Clippers still had 2 high first-round picks, with number 8 and number 14. They used the 14th pick on Michael Cage, passing on John Stockton. As for the 8th pick, the Clippers selected Lancaster Gordon, passing on future All-Stars Otis Thorpe and Kevin Willis, in addition to Stockton. Gordon played just 4 insignificant seasons with the Clippers before leaving the NBA to play internationally. So, somehow, despite the 1984 draft being stacked with future Hall of Famers and All-Stars, the Clippers managed to come away with 2 average players from a draft pool that was so deep, you would think it would be near impossible, with 2 high first-round picks, not to draft at least a future All-Star, even if only by sheer dumb luck. While there's no doubt that Baylor deserves some of the blame for the Clippers' draft fails, the majority of the blame belongs to the team's owner, Donald Sterling, as he was notorious for micromanaging everything about the organization, especially when it came to things he knew little to nothing about, such as the draft. According to Baylor, the only time Sterling didn't interfere with the Clippers' draft selection was for the 1999 draft. The team had the 4th pick, but, according to Sterling, the draft didn't feature any exciting players to warrant him getting involved in the selection. Despite the draft featuring Ron Artest, Andrei Kirilenko, and Manu Ginobili, the Clippers selected Lamar Odom. While he wasn't the best player the Clippers could have taken, he was a solid selection. It speaks volumes about just how much Sterling had interfered in draft picks over the years, given that one of Baylor's crowning achievements during his time with the Clippers was simply making an adequate draft selection, purely because the owner of the team just happened not to care about the draft that one year.
Adequate!
Of all the high draft picks that the Clippers squandered, the worst is by far their 1998 first-round pick. The team finally won the draft lottery, and they could have selected Mike Bibby, Antoine Jameson, Vince Carter, Dirk Nowitzki, or Paul Pierce. Instead, they picked Michael Olowokandi, and they did so knowing that it was a gamble. A pre-draft comparison to Hakeem Olajuwon had been enough to convince Sterling that Olowokandi was worth the risk, and Sterling was soon proven to be wrong.
Marbury off the dribble.
Stoudemire and one, and the rookie powers to the rack. Oh my!
Olowokandi turned out to be one of the worst number 1 picks of all time. Even the undrafted Brad Miller had a career that was infinitely better than Olowokandi's. It's one thing to gamble a high pick on a player whose talents and potential are largely unknown, but to do so with the first overall pick was crazy. To make matters worse, if the Clippers were willing to take a risk on an unknown, they could have taken Nowitzki, though there's pretty obvious reason why Sterling didn't want to do that.
Clippers guard J.J. Redick says he was exposed to Sterling's ways, as we will call him, when he was trying to do his deal. It was a 4-year, $27 million deal that nearly fell apart. Here's what Redick had to say about the reasonings behind it. I've been told both ways. One, that he didn't want me to pay me because I was white, and that he didn't want to pay me because I was a bench player.
With a promising core of young players, and the veteran leadership of Baron Davis, who had suddenly started to look like his old self, the Clippers' 10-11 season started with great promise. Finally, the Clippers were getting legitimately great publicity. There was newfound hope for the team's long-suffering fan base. Blake Griffin's high-flying talents had immediately changed the culture of the Clippers, and the franchise seemed to be on the verge of becoming relevant for years to come. But this was still Sterling's Clippers, and the team was never without controversy. In America, it's common knowledge that Black History Month is celebrated in the month of February. However, in 2011, rather than celebrate Black history throughout February, the Clippers announced that they would have a one-off celebration for Black History Month in March. The Clippers announced their plans via an ad that appeared in Sunday's Los Angeles Times. The promo detailed how the first 1,000 underprivileged children to bring the ad to the game would get in free. Everything about this decision by Sterling was weird. The reason for this move was unclear. It appeared to have been a scheduling issue, as the Clippers played a lot of road games in February that year, but the team still had home games during the month. Sterling also chose to prominently feature himself in the promotion, which was ill-advised. At the time, Sterling already had a well-established history of bigotry, having been sued numerous times for prejudicial rental procedures in the numerous apartment buildings he owned. Not that Clippers fans would have been surprised to see Sterling be so oblivious, or shameless.
That is one big pile of shit.
Sterling made his fortune through a number of means. One of the most lucrative was his properties. He was known to buy valuable real estate and make cosmetic alterations and repairs, while neglecting to fix expensive fundamental problems. Given that his approach was largely financially successful, Sterling adopted the same mentality for running an NBA franchise, because, after purchasing the Clippers, he immediately set about cutting costs. During his first season as the owner, Sterling asked the coach, Paul Silas, if the players really needed a trainer, then asked Silas to personally tape up the players before games instead. During his second season, Sterling reportedly proposed trimming the team's budget by slashing training camp expenses from more than $50,000 to about $100, slashing the scouting budget from $20,000 to about $1,000, reducing advertising from $200,000 to less than $9,000, and cutting medical expenses from about $10,000 to $100. In March 2010, after the Clippers fired the team's general manager, Mike Dunleavy Sr., Sterling refused to pay out the remainder of his guaranteed contract. So, Dunleavy was forced to sue the team, and eventually got $13 million after going through arbitration in 2011. Arguably the weirdest and most absurd example of Sterling's cheapness was in 1981. As part of a promotion, Sterling invited prominent lawyers and real estate agents to a launch to meet the players and enter a foul shooting contest, for which the prize was $1,000. One of the attendees was lawyer Michael Spilger, who had captained San Diego State's 69-70s basketball team. Spilger won the contest after making 9 out of 10 shots, and he was immediately informed that the prize had been changed. Spilger's reward was now 5 days and 4 nights in Puerto Rico, but the deal didn't include airfare, transportation, or food expenses, so Spilger just wanted the $1,000. Sterling countered with an offer of double or nothing, but Spilger was happy with the $1,000. Sterling then offered 2 season tickets, but Spilger already had some. Frustrated, Sterling promised that the team's promotion department would work things out. 2 weeks later, Spilger got a letter congratulating him for winning 3 days and 2 nights in Las Vegas. In response, Spilger sued the Clippers for fraud. Later, at a Clippers home game in 1982, a team official offered Spilger a compromise, a $1,000 donation to his favorite charity. In response, Spilger said he'd see the team official in court. 2 days later, and more than a year after the free throw contest, Spilger finally got his money. Ultimately, the only time Sterling was willing to spend money was when he relocated the team to Los Angeles without the NBA's permission in 1984. Because the move was not approved by the league, Sterling was fined $25 million. In response, Sterling sued the league for $100 million. Eventually, the suit was dropped when the league agreed to decrease the fine to $6 million. Due to Sterling and his slumlord approach to running an NBA franchise, the team suffered, the fans suffered, but arguably, no one suffered more than the players themselves. Until recently, the Clippers have been arguably the worst franchise in professional sports. Much of the blame can be attributed to Sterling, who's shown little to no interest in ever winning. This is because his sole priority was always about making a profit and enjoying the status of owning a basketball team. In the 1990s, Sterling bought the California Bank building and immediately renamed it Sterling Plaza. For years, the opulent office space remained virtually unoccupied. The building's sole tenant was its landlord, Sterling, whose offices occupied the 6th and 7th floor. Sterling's reason for buying and occupying the building mirrored his motivation for owning the Clippers. He did so just because he could. Sterling had bought the Clippers after being urged to do so by Lakers owner Jerry Buss in the early 1980s. Sterling had bought 11 apartment complexes from Buss, who then used the money to buy the Lakers. Buss later encouraged Sterling to purchase the Clippers, which he did with the sole intention to use the team as a trophy, and he regarded the players of the team in much the same way. Arguably, the worst example of Sterling's cost-cutting and his contempt for his own players came early on in his ownership. Another way Sterling tried to save money was to avoid adding players to his team's roster, even when injuries reduced the team's available players to the league's minimum of 8. In one case, the Clippers were almost forced to forfeit a game after forward Michael Brooks had dental surgery. But rather than either forfeit the game or add another player for the league minimum pay, Sterling forced Brooks to suit up. In 1984, Marquise Johnson's first real interaction with Sterling came during the year's Christmas party. The team had hired a Santa Claus, and Sterling insisted that every player had to sit on Santa's lap and take a picture. Marquise felt humiliated and refused. A team official quickly informed him that Sterling was upset by his refusal. Ultimately, Marquise relented and faked playing along with it. A few weeks later, Marquise received a copy of the photo and immediately burnt it out of embarrassment for not having the nerve to stand up for himself, before binging on cocaine and vodka out of frustration. Numerous other stories have emerged over the years of Sterling's mistreatment of his players, almost all of which had undertones of prejudice.
I'm offering a lot of money for a poor black kid, he said. That was in regard to Danny Manning.
It was the Baron Davis year, and the year they were so bad that they ended up with Blake Griffin, right? And one time Donald came into the locker room and he was really upset because he played Baron Davis a lot of money, and he thought that should, if he was going to spend money, they should win. Like he thought that's how that worked. Like I never spend money, so then when I do, it better work. And he was really angry at Barron and just yelling and screaming at everyone in there, and specifically targeting Barron and saying how disappointing this was, except it wasn't Barron that he was yelling at. Oh. It was Al Thornton, who just happened to be standing in front of him, and Barron's locker was behind him, and
Over the years, there were calls for the league to do something about Sterling, but the NBA always resisted. It wasn't until April 2014 that the NBA finally did something about the owner, after disturbing recordings of him surfaced.
Yeah, it bothers me a lot that you want to broadcast that you're associating with black people.
The views expressed by Mr. Sterling are deeply offensive and harmful. Accordingly, effective immediately, I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA. Mr. Sterling may not attend any NBA games or practices. He may not be present at any Clippers facility, and he may not participate in any business or player personnel decisions involving the team. He will also be barred from attending NBA Board of Governors meetings or participating in any other league activity. I am also fining Mr. Sterling $2.5 million, the maximum amount allowed under the NBA Constitution.
The NBA appointed a CEO to run the Clippers before former CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, purchased the team for $2 billion. Ballmer officially took control of the team in August 2014 and soon set about rebranding both the team and its culture.
Are you kidding me?
No. Although he couldn't achieve success with Lob City and soon broke up the iconic Clippers squad, he has since managed to do the seemingly impossible and take one of the worst run and least successful teams in all of sports and turn them into a legitimate contender, but more importantly, a respectable NBA franchise, both on and off the court.
Donald Sterling, who promised to make San Diego proud of the Clippers, he didn't.